Welcome back, kids. It's the Resilient Entrepreneur Podcast. This is Kevin Johnson of Leverage Consulting. And this podcast is brought to you by one of my favorite phrases that I love to hear. I have to do it. And I can't tell you how often I hear people in the business world, when I say this, sometimes it's clients, their team, sometimes it is when I'm the customer and I go places and of course, doing what I do for a living or doing what I do for clients, I just don't turn this stuff off. I'm always watching and listening. It makes me laugh and it makes me cry all at the same time about when I hear people say, well, I have to do it. So when I hear this, I want you to visualize what I see. So when I hear people say, I have to do it, I visualize them putting themselves on a dog chain. So imagine chaining yourself up and also at the same time putting yourself on a choke collar. So you're on a short leash and you're on a choke collar all at the same time. When you make that statement, that's exactly what you're doing. You're figuring out a way to put yourself on a short leash. You're limiting your range. You're limiting your ability. You're choking yourself off to the point that you're only able to do so much. And what you really need to do is start thinking about the freedom that you can create. And when I say freedom, it doesn't necessarily mean the retirement freedom and things like that, which ultimately it should bring to you. But what you really want to start thinking about, and this was a question I posed to another team member of a client of mine recently, and they started going down through the list of, I need to do this. I need to do this. I need to do this. So what I had done is I had this person send me the list of all the things that they did. Now, mind you, I know it wasn't everything, and it really wasn't, we're not talking about like a book report. Give me a bullet list of the things that you tend to do through the course of a week. And we started going through it, and as we did, we started uncovering a bunch of things that I started sounding like a broken record. And I started asking this person, where do you add value on this item? And when we're walking through it and we started dissecting their to-do list, there's probably at least half the list of the things that they said they had to do, they don't have to do. They don't add any value whatsoever to that thing that they say they have to do. Because essentially, they're saying that unless they do it, it's not going to be done right. So really, and let's go back to that leash example that I just said. You're doing the same thing to your team. When you say, I have to do it, you're saying you don't believe in their capabilities. You're also insulting yourself by saying, I don't hire people good enough that can actually do these things. I'm hiring people to help me grow this business, but I'm not only limiting them, but I'm limiting myself. And it sounds like an oxymoron, and guess what? It is. It is an oxymoron. That statement is oftentimes one of the hardest things to work through or get over, but is far from impossible. Because the reality of it is, once you decide to let go, it's super easy. Absolutely super easy. But I think what helps people understand or figure out how to let go is A, they have to have someone in their corner. B, they have to have someone who's willing and able to help them create the structure, the systems, the scripting, and so forth to get those things done. Maybe help create the expectations. There's a number of things. But in reality, it's kind of like, think of it as somebody's got my back. Somebody's going to help me work through this. But all of it still comes down to, I have to let go. Because there are very few things in life that you can't farm out. And, I detest this statement that I'm going to say as much as I realize that it is absolutely true. And that is, everyone is replaceable. I don't like the statement at all because I think it's demoralizing, and I think it's one that's just it's a bad thought process to have. It's a bad team vibe, if you want to call it that. I don't like the statement, but the reality of it is 100% true. I could give you countless examples, but one of the things that I always come back to is we worked with a client years ago, and this was an orthodontist. So you figure if you have an orthodontist or a doctor, a surgeon, a dentist, whoever it is, and they're the only doctor in that practice, if something happens to them, then the business goes away, right? It just stops. Well, this was a really fun guy. He was probably 50 years old, and he was riding his motorcycle to work one day. And yes, you're starting to jump ahead of the story here, but he was riding his motorcycle to work, and someone pulled out in front of him. And unfortunate circumstance, he broadsided the car. He went over the car, and he literally split his head open on the pavement. And when I say he split it open, I mean the scar went from between his eyebrows to the back of his head. And one would think in a case like that, God forbid, if he had actually passed as a result of the accident, then, the practice is no more. But in that instance, there were other practitioners in the community that came in, and they actually took up the practice for him, and they filled in and kept the practice going. So my point in bringing that example up is just something that I think about periodically, in the sense that everyone is replaceable. So when we come back to the statement about I have to do it, no, you don't. Because I can assure you, I can bring someone else that can do the job. I can take your job and give it to someone else. And if they could delegate it, then I can assure you can as well. When you think that they're not going to do it exactly the way I do it, well, first prove to me that it has to be done exactly the way you do it. Because there's oftentimes I could give something to someone else, and maybe they don't do it exactly the way I do it. Who knows? Maybe they do it better. Maybe they've got a better way of saying something than I do. Maybe they don't do certain aspects of it, but when you add it all up, it's still as good or better than what I do. So you come back to this statement about I have to do it. Well, what if that person did it at least 80% as good as you? Now they've just freed you up to go do other things. Essentially what you're trying to do is figure out a way to get rid of the dog chain, get rid of the choke collar, and allow yourself the freedom to, because many of you who are listening to this and thinking about it, you have some job responsibility, whether it's managing other people or managing a process or something. And it doesn't matter where you are in the business, everyone manages something. Even if you, let's just say, worked at a fast food restaurant and you took orders, it might be one of the more entry-level jobs at the fast food restaurant, but you still manage a process. You manage an order. You manage customer satisfaction. So if you have anything from that to I own this thing, I own this business, then there's opportunities to own the process, but also potentially delegate things. So, because I can assure you, the person who takes the order doesn't run to the back. They don't run to the back and immediately drop the fries in the fryer. They've got someone else for that. And whether you build homes, you have a practice, you are a real estate agent, whatever it is, you have the ability to delegate more, but you have to put that expectation and accountability on that person, and you have to give them the rope. You have to give them the freedom to be able to actually do what you did. And yes, they may have to make a few mistakes, because I can guarantee you were not perfect the first time you did those things. So once you decide that you can give this thing up, once you decide that you can delegate, once you decide that you're going to give yourself and your team members the freedom to work through this, make a mistake or two, but also create that expectation that you're going to leverage yourself through your team, that's how we grow. That's how it, if you think back to the podcast that I talked about, time and freedom and income and so on, that's what you're gaining. When you decide that you're going to delegate and you are not required to do absolutely everything, you'll be shocked at the freedom and the income, the time and the life that you get back.